Dre, did you
Yes,
hear her?
sir.
She flipped 60 houses in a
60
downpour.
houses.
She sold 13.1 million. Are you
Million.
sure, we have her here to talk about these pink cars, or should we
I
talk
know, I
about the
know.
women?
She buried the lead, Smiley. She buried the lead.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dre and Smiley, the Inner Circle podcast.
Smiley, man, we have a great guest today. So, quick little context. So, I'm always excited and interested in learning about entrepreneurs. I'm watching the news one day, and I hear a story about a lady who has a car service that's Uber on steroids, essentially, right? This car service is dedicated to providing safe service to women and men, but in terms of getting them from point A to point B safely. And so a year later, she was on the news again. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. She's growing her business. She's doing her thing. So I'm driving down the street one day, talking to a friend of mine on the phone. In my rearview mirror, I see this pink Honda Pilot. I'm like, that's her. You know what I did, Smiley? You know what I did?
What you do? What you
I
do?
got out of the car and went over to her and said, hey, I saw you on the news. I'd love to have you on our podcast. And guess what she said?
What'd she say?
She said yes. So with that, let me
Awesome.
read a quick bio and then we'll kick right into it. So Shannon is the visionary behind Nash Pink Ride, a groundbreaking service dedicated to providing safe and secure transportation for women, inspired by alarming news reports of women being robbed or worse, assaulted during rides with popular rideshare services. Her 2024 Honda Pilot, distinctively wrapped in pink, has become a symbol of trust and security for countless passengers. While Nash Pink Ride primarily focuses on women's safety, she also provides rides for men as well, making the service a community staple for all. So with that, Shannon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. So as I shared at the start, when I heard about your entrepreneurship, right, in terms of starting this car service, my mind was blown. Brilliant. Where'd the idea come from?
Well, it was being reported on the news that two ladies had gotten into an Uber downtown and were robbed by the driver, who was not necessarily an Uber driver. He was promoting himself as one and was not. So therefore, I sought out the idea of changing that and creating my own website and then wrapping the car in pink so I stand out more. And therefore, the business has more than quadrupled after being featured on the news, featured in Franklin Lifestyle magazine, where I'm based out of. Everyone that I take is so thankful and just tells me time and time again, thank you for starting this service. We feel so much safer with you.
So take us back a bit. So have you always been an entrepreneur?
Many, many years ago, I started in real estate and got my real estate license. And then my husband and I moved here in 2018 and COVID hit. And I decided to go get my CDL. And I drove a semi. I started with Schneider and Averett, and I drove across the country. And I thought, this is really great. I love doing this, but I'd rather sleep in my own bed. So after doing that, I thought, well, Uber and Lyft are great. Instacart's kind of neat. What would stand out? And what stood out was, hey, a pink car would really stand out. And so that drove that idea. After trying many different things, I tried my insurance license and tried to sell Medicare insurance, and then doing real estate. I've done real estate in 3 different states, and that's still another area that has safety issues also. But the car service, Nashville needed a female car service, especially with all the people that travel here. And when I pick up these young ladies at the airport that have never been to Nashville, and they all pile in the car and say, well, where should we go? Or what should we do? And give them ideas. So just many different things kind of popped into my head to starting this, and it's really evolved.
No, that's fascinating because I have a 17-year-old daughter, and it just scares me because she's going to be getting into Ubers. So when I was researching your company and you, I was like, this is such a genius idea So from the idea of wrapping your car in pink, how does the technology work? Are you Uber-ish, or do you call them like a regular taxi service, or are you a offline or a division of Uber, or how is that structured?
No, I'm not Uber at all. I have a website called nashpinkride.com. And so I do point to point. I'm basically called a livery service. So kind of on the edge of limo, but not quite. So they go to my website and click on the button that says request a quote. Once they do that, it shoots me a text message and an email, and then I respond to that quote with pricing that I base on radius. And I specifically service Davidson and Williamson counties. So then once I respond with their quote, they reply back, and I do that via email. And then they request the time that they'd like. And then after we've confirmed that pickup, I confirm the day ahead with a text confirmation with them. And that's how we communicate back and forth with that confirmation text.
And so with your drivers, do they go through a rigorous process? Say, for example, is it only
Um,
ladies driving ladies, or is it trusted men that you allow into the program to drive ladies?
it's both.
Okay,
And
awesome.
the men wear a pink vest and pink bow tie and white shirt and dress pants. And the ladies are notified if they have a male driver. And all the drivers are background checked and fingerprinted, also registered with the city of Nashville and permitted, and same with the BNA with the airport. And that's a
Now,
stringent permitting process through both.
and do you, like you mentioned the CDL, which I know in order to have a CDL to drive a big truck, you have to have a special license. Do you need special licenses to drive where your car service and what is that
Yes,
called? Mm-hmm,
it's a Class E license, and you have to
mm-hmm.
go to the drivers of the DMV, and you have to physically take the test and pass that test to drive livery service.
All right, that's
Unlike
awesome.
CDL, whereas a CDL, you go through 4 weeks of training to obtain that and do a DOT license and do a physical.
Okay. And when you do the driving, you said the radius. Is it like 100-mile radius, 50-mile radius?
I basically do a 50-mile radius unless it's a special request and I can reserve and book that event in advance, then I'm more than glad to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an obvious question. What has been the biggest obstacle to getting this business off the ground?
The advertising and the cost of entering the Honda Pilot that I have now was a $60,000 car, and then to have it wrapped was $7,000, and then you have to buy an umbrella liability policy on top of the car policy, and the business liability policy is $10,000 a year, and then pay for car insurance on top of that because I'm transporting people. So I have to have $1 million policy on me and my car.
So how did you overcome that? Were banks tripping over themselves to give you money? Do you have a rich uncle that said, "Hey, here's $1 million"?
My husband and I have actually saved all our lives, and we used retirement seed money because we're planning for our retirement. I want to call, say, serial entrepreneurs. My husband also has a business of his own that he does on the side.
I love
And
that.
so
I
we use
love
that
that.
money. So I'm debt free right now. So I'd like
Yes,
to stay that way. So each time my customer base grows, purchase another car and obtain another driver.
that's great. So you mentioned the growth of the business. So
Mhm.
what's the end game in terms of growing the business?
I'd like to franchise and be in different cities. I have so many people that come in from New York and DC and Canada, even ladies from those areas, and say, I wish I had this in where I live. And so I would
Yeah.
like to have another Franklin Pink Ride, DC Pink Ride, New York Pink Ride.
Have you seen any competitors pop up in the area that you're in now?
There are other ladies that I'm actually friends with that if I'm overbooked that I work with and give them business and we trade back and forth. But I haven't seen anyone specifically with a pink car or a colored vehicle. There are the limo services, and then specific ladies transit is another one that I work with quite a bit, but she does not have a pink car.
Right. The branding is everything, right? In
Mhm.
terms of, keeping a standard and that sort of thing. How do you go about training those that work with you to provide a high caliber of service? Tell me what that training looks like.
They go through stringent chauffeur training and watch videos on that and specific customer service training on that to be open to everyone and to cater to those people when you arrive to their their house, ask them how they're doing, get out and approach them and see if they need assistance with their baggage and getting into the car. I have disabled people that I work with and take to medical appointments and assist them into the medical appointment. I have people with wheelchairs that I disassemble the wheelchairs for and assist them that way. So they have to be trained on how to work with different people in different age groups. And
Yeah.
that's how we do those.
I'm going to pass over to Smiley here in a second.
Hmm.
For those that are interested in leaving the cubicle, right, and
Hmm.
getting into entrepreneurship, it's challenging. You are kind of at an advantage because you mentioned that you and your husband were serial entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
Um, where did that come from? Growing up, did your family own a store and just kind of saw it firsthand? Where did this idea of, hey, you know what? I don't even want to look at a cubicle. I'm going to try to figure it out my own. I'll get my CDL. I'll sell real estate. Where did all that come from?
My mom, she was working
Ah,
retail. She was a hairdresser and she tried many different things and she decided that she wanted to quit smoking. And so to quit smoking, she needed to busy her hands. So she started china painting and started to do art and craft shows. And then she decided, well, instead of just doing the shows, I'm going to become an art and craft show promoter. And so she promoted shows all across the country in malls and outside and did that for 30 years. While I was growing up as a kid, I was traveling around to malls and to Yellowstone and to all places of the country where she was doing art and craft shows with my parents. They started with $30 in their pocket, got in the car and took off. And my mom would make $500 in 3 days, and in the 70s and 80s,
wow.
that was a huge amount. And so my
Yeah.
mom doing that. And then she went from art craft show promoting to starting a store called Just Country. And she would put those into malls. She had one in Dallas, Texas, and she had one in Illinois and one out in Wyoming. And we would travel to those stores where she sold her merchandise that she made. And so that was the
Man.
genesis for me getting out of the cubicle and wanting to try something different.
Yeah. I
I,
just want one comment before I pass to Smiley here. Something that both Smiley and I share or talk about often is exposure. Exposure is
Hmm.
everything, right? For some
Hmm.
people, all they've seen is their parents get up, go to a job, work there for 60 years, retire. For others, they've seen something different. They've seen um, their parents or people that are, close to them. They have this hustle, they have this grind, they have this grit and they don't know how it's going to impact them, but usually they end up like you, in terms of just having this sense of, hey, what can I do different? What can I do to generate income that's outside of working for someone else? And you're a great example of that. You saw your mother go from, you know, working for someone to getting into entrepreneurship, doing it on her own, and you saw firsthand that, wow, in a short period of time, I can make a lot of money.
Hmm.
uh, so there's options there. So yeah, exposure is everything. Thanks for sharing that story about your mom.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on something you said earlier because you mentioned that you're debt free and you use your retirement to fund your business.
Hmm.
And imagine someone like, what would you say to someone that's like similar? They have this passion, this business idea that's just burning up inside of them. And they have all this money in their 4K, but they're afraid to touch it because they're like, oh, I got to pay the taxes. I got to do the penalty. And when I listen to people like you, entrepreneurial persons who are successful, who stood at the edge, you jumped and you soared. Other people are like, if I jump, I may crash in the
I
ravine
may
below, but
crash, I may not succeed.
I'm going to sink. So when because you have to go through that, maybe that internal battle. Like, all right, I've been putting money aside for 20 years into this 401k. That's not going to be, it's not growing. Maybe it's 5%, 7%, maybe it's 9. But I have this desire, and if I just tap it, I will soar, and I'm not going to sink. And how did you have that conflict, or because you were always an entrepreneur, you just like, you know what, I'm going to seed, I'm going to just grab this capital and use it? What would you say?
Well, because for many years, I was a single parent and raising my son doing real estate, didn't have the backup of having an hourly income. You got paid when you close on a piece of real estate, and that could be 30, 60, 90 days. And so was raising my son trying to do this real estate thing. And so you had to make enough money to keep that income coming in, and you had to save that income and make it last till that next closing was going to be. And I did this through 2007, 2008. I did 13.1 million in Arkansas in real estate back in the crash. And so to keep that going and to keep my son and I afloat, I put him through private school and I flipped houses. I flipped 60 houses before I decided we moved here. And this is my 60th, and I got to do something different. I'm getting burnt out on this. And so that's where kind of the CDL and the driving kind of came from. And I didn't necessarily have 401k. I did the stock market and IRAs. So I haven't had to touch the 401k that you can't really touch to your 59 and a half without that penalty. And I'm not 59 and a half and can't touch that. It's all about risk. And if you feel your idea is great enough and you can test it out and you can't be worried about what people are going to say and just go for it.
Hold up, I gotta talk to Dre for 1 second. Dre, did you
Yes,
hear her?
sir.
She flipped 60 houses in a
60
downturn.
houses.
She sold 13.1 million. Are you
Million.
sure, we have her here to talk about these pink cars, or should we
I
talk
know, I
about the
know.
real?
She buried the lead, Smiley. She buried the
No,
lead.
Dre, we're at the tip of the iceberg with
I
Shannon.
know, I know.
Did you book her for 2 hours or just
I know.
35 minutes?
I'm like,
Sorry.
what? Yeah, it's
Let's go
60
back to Shannon.
houses. I'd love to hear more about that.
That is
This back here,
amazing, Shannon.
this back here is part of a renovation we just completed. It took 86 days to totally remodel our house.
So
Wow.
you manage the projects, you manage the GCs, so you must do all of that. Or
I
because you've
actually
been in
worked
the
with an interior designer for this, and I try to find contractors in the area that I live in. I've also lived in Arkansas and Missouri, and then when we moved here, I found an interior designer here who had her own crew, and we were able to totally gut our house in 86 days.
Wow. 86 days.
wow.
Yes.
See, that's amazing.
That's
So this
amazing.
is this is my invitation for you to come back because I know we're talking about the cars, but
Mhm.
you're like what is that beautiful flower? You pull it back and you find more
There's
beauty like an
layers.
orchid. It's layers
Right,
of
right.
different
Yes.
things. So,
Yeah.
well, the one thing you talked about, and this is something that is, I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. I'm from Tampa, Florida,
Oh,
and I
wow.
was on the plane. Oh, you know
Mhm.
Appleton?
Yeah, I'm
And
from Peoria, Illinois. That's where I grew up.
no way. I grew up here in
Yeah.
Appleton, and I'm up
Yeah.
here for my 40th high school reunion.
Oh,
And
awesome.
on the plane, I was talking to this entrepreneurial person and trying to get him on the podcast, and he says, well, what happens is if you save and while you're in corporate America, you put yourself in a position to afford the risks. And I've never
Hmm.
heard it phrased that way. It's like if you do what you have, if your business is a 50,000, 10,000, or 100,000, if you manage your money properly, now you can
Hmm.
afford the risk. So when you make that leap into your business or entrepreneurial, it's not as risky because you can afford the risk. And I was like,
Hmm.
that's a clever phrase. And when you talked about risk, you positioned yourself so it was your skills and your experience and your exposure reduced the risk because you knew
Hmm.
you were going to succeed. And
Hmm.
that's just amazing. And I think when you're in the real estate, you're driving trucks, you grew up in Peoria, lived in Arkansas, and now you're in Nashville.
Hmm.
Where is Shannon 10 years from now? Is Shannon, like you said, the franchise? That franchise is a clever idea because
Hmm.
now, is it in the future Lyft buys you for $20 billion? Or are you franchise and now you're a competitor? You got Lyft, Uber, and Shannon's Pink Rides? What's 10 years? What does that look like?
10 year, I would love to be able to sell it somebody bigger than me that could do more than I can afford to do currently. I would love to do that. Or if I'm able to find the right franchise attorney and be able to make it grow, then I'm all for doing that. I just never know what the next step is going to be. I don't really have, I'm just, what is it, impulsive, and just whatever comes to mind, try it. And if it works, then go with it. And so this has been, we've been over a year with Nash Pink Ride, and I've done real estate for 30 years. So it just however it evolves.
Yeah. How do you stay motivated?
Well, money is a big motivator. I have to be able to
Yes, it
pay
is.
my
Yes, it
bills.
is.
Yeah, and I have to save up for that business insurance and put that away, and I have to pay different things. But I'm, saving for growing the business, and so, and these people that I take, they're fantastic. They're a great motivator. I get excited when I have a regular. and I get to see them again, or they text me and say, "Hey, it's great. We're going to travel again. Can we have a ride at this time?" And they know me and they know that I'll be there for them. And it's that really keeps you going.
Sure.
That's that's cool. And you mentioned like your mother with the trade, the crafts and different things. But when you were getting into real estate, or even when you look back, who's your source of? Is it Kiyosaki? Is it Sheets? Or all these different gurus in real estate, or these investment gurus? Susie Orman. Who do you look to and say, you know what? That's who I go to Robert Kiyosaki and listen to one of his things, or what's that guy's name? He's all in your face. Grant Cardone, he's
Oh
all into
yeah.
real estate. He's all, who
Right.
hypes you up when you're just like, okay, I'm in session. Let me just, is it Warren Buffett? Who is that person that external source that you go to and say, all right, let me get charged up from a Zig Ziglar or Tony Robbins?
Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank.
Ah,
She
Oh,
does
Shark.
so
yeah.
many different, she does specializes in real estate, but then she also has many different businesses also that she invests in. And so I look at her and say, wow, she can do all that. That's who, I want to be like.
Yeah. And she has an interesting story too, in terms of how she
Hmm.
got into real estate, the challenges that she faced, is that sort of thing. So I could
Hmm.
see what, her being someone that kind of inspires. Um, and again, because she has so many different businesses like yourself, you have your hands in a
Yeah.
lot of different things. Speaking of which, how do you time management, right? That's everything.
Yes.
How do you manage all these different things that you're doing? It's a lot, relatively speaking. Do you
Hmm.
have an assistant? Tell me the secret to managing it all.
And right now it's just me doing it all, and I use a lot of Google, Google
Okay.
Calendars, Google Docs, and so I just use a lot of Google Schedule and calendaring, and that really
Okay.
keeps me on point.
Okay. Is there one moment that you've experienced in the past year or two that, aside from the money, has been reaffirming for you to say, you know what, I'm so glad I'm on this path?
Yes, the couple that she has spina bifida and he is blind, but they both work. He works for the Tennessee School of the Blind. He's a translator, translates books, and she works from home. And so when I pick this couple up and she had knee replacement surgery and they say, we had this horrible experience. I got into a lift car and he had an open container and she shows me the picture. Or she says the lift driver I requested was a woman. She threw out my wheelchair and didn't help me with it. That in itself, and they're so thankful to have me. They said, we love you. If we could have you all the time, we would love your service. It's people like that reaffirm. Like this afternoon, I pick up a Supreme Court judge who retired here, and him and his wife are fantastic people. He's gone to California for 2 weeks to sit on the bench to make extra money for his family. He's retired, and it's these neat people that I have that I've built relationships with.
Yeah. That resonates with me, Shannon. I'll tell you why. There's been more than one occasion when I've had a service like Uber or Lyft, where afterwards I'll come home and tell my family, like, I'm so glad that I was in the car and not my daughter or my wife,
Hmm.
because it's just such a awful experience. I
Hmm.
got, I got in the car with one guy and he seemed unhappy. And so I'm kept to myself, thinking he would keep to himself. He starts sharing about how miserable he was. So I'm thinking, okay, let me change the subject. Let me start, talking about happy things to get him, to focus on the road and get me home safely. And at every turn, he was just, I'm like, is this guy about to run the car off the? It was an awful experience.
Wow.
And that's just one. That's
Uh-huh.
just one. So I could see how, some women, had they been in
Hmm.
that situation, or just an everyday person, like you mentioned,
Hmm.
the individual with the wheelchair and others, they want someone who can actually just provide basic kindness and
Hmm.
get them where they need to be. And it sounds like that's, kind of what your business model is. You want to be
Yeah,
kind.
Yeah, I have parents of Belmont students. The parents reach out to me for their daughters that are here from other parts of the country to go to school, and they love that they know their daughter is secure and going to be picked up from the airport or taken to a concert at Bridgestone, and I'm there to take them back and forth and securely get them safely to each place.
Gotta love that.
One thing you mentioned, and this is another one that's so amazing about what you're doing, is you say you use Google Docs, Google Calendars, and it seems like you don't have an IT person. So if resources, one is how are you learning all to stay abreast of all this technology, the internet, the AI, the everything you're doing, your scheduling. It's like project management, and you're doing it all yourself. Is it challenging, or do you just pick it up, or you just have an affinity towards that technology stuff?
I have an affinity towards it. Plus, I'm also married to an IT guy, and so
That helps.
that helps a lot.
No, I was wondering because I'm like, if he's doing too much, how does she just jump in there and do it all? So that's really a blessing. Awesome. Now we're getting ready to move into the final four.
How's that for technology?
That's awesome. Love it.
Well, the first final four question, this will be a little different, is what is something that never fails to make you laugh?
People at the airport, when I drive up, the entertainment at the airport never fails of what I see at the airport. So,
Yeah, it's something else. It's something else. Here's another question for you. So, what's one thing that you wish you were better at?
oh boy, probably more patient. I'm worried about being there and worried about anxiety with being late. I don't like to be late. And so I seem like I'm trying to be in a hurry, but I can't let anybody know I'm in a hurry and I have to drive the speed limit and that's probably my patience and anxiety with making sure I'm there on time and watching traffic with my Google Maps and all of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So I have that problem as well, wanting to be on time. Yesterday, I went to go pick up my son from the gym, and it was 4 o'clock. And I asked him what time he wanted me to be there. He said 4. So I'm there. I get there about 3:50. I'm always early. Early is on time. On time is late. Late is unacceptable. And so
Right.
I get there about 3:50. 4 o'clock comes. I don't hear from him. He doesn't come out. 4:10 comes. I don't hear from him. He doesn't come out. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not in a hurry. No problem. He's having fun playing basketball, hanging out with his friends. No problem. So then he texts me and says, "Are you outside?" And so I remind him, if I tell you I'm going to be somewhere at a certain time and I'm not there, there's a bigger problem. I said, a man is only as good as his word. And if I say I'm going to be on, and when I'm late, oh, Shannon, it just, it's something comes over me. It's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an issue. It's a big issue if I'm late.
Yes.
Okay, I can appreciate what you're saying.
Yes.
I'm in sales and I travel a lot, and if the airplane makes me late, I accept it. I tell Dre, the only thing I have a request with the plane or the pilot, land softly. You can
That's
land
it.
late,
That's
just
it.
land softly.
Land softly.
Yes.
Outside of the pilot, I did not accept being late. I hate being late. I will be extra early. And
Me and Smiley are very similar in this respect. Tell her how early you would arrive for like a 6 a.m. flight.
I'm there at 4 a.m. I'm
Yes,
there 2
that's
hours
typical
early.
though. Yeah,
Yeah.
all my riders are always 2 hours early.
I live 5 miles from the airport in Tampa. It drives my wife crazy. I'm 5 miles away from the airport, but I'm there at 4 a.m. And she's like, we could leave at 5 and get there at 5:05. I was like, nope, something
Nope.
could
Yep,
happen.
that's right.
Here's another final four question. Alive or dead, who would you want to spend 24 hours with and why?
Would be my sister. She passed away from breast cancer in 2020 at the age of
Oh,
58, and I would just kill to spend some more time with her. It was too short here.
oh,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah,
yeah.
my
Awesome.
condolences on your sister.
My
Thank
condolences.
you.
What's the best compliment you've ever received?
Probably people is saying how nice I am to drive to drive, being with when they get in and they talk to me and how relaxed and how they can start a conversation and we can just talk about anything in the car. I feel like a hairdresser some days. Everybody just tells me everything. So yeah, that is it. What people that love me and hug me when I get to the airport and I've met them one time and they get out of the car and they want to hug and I think that's a compliment.
That resonates with me as well. Smiling when I saw her in my rear view, I saw her car, and I got out. I probably would have asked for a hug if there weren't a light there,
Yeah.
but I got out and I told her about the podcast. And you never know, you never know with individuals, like what, And she was what crossed my mind when I got back in the car is how warm, patient, and kind she was. We may have spoke for about 45 seconds. I told her about the
Mhm.
podcast. She was like, sure. In fact, here's one of my cards.
Cards.
She has
Yeah.
she has one of these cards that she gave me to, so yeah, I could see how someone could spend 20 or 30 minutes with you and want to give you a hug. I could definitely see that.
When Dre mentioned you, he was enthused and excitedly telling me about you. And I was like, a Mary Kay lady started a drive share company.
Mary Kay lady.
Well, because Mary
Oh, because
Kay
the
has a
pink.
pink
Because the
car.
pink.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
pink.
And then I was thinking, then he said it was a Honda Pilot. I was like, Mary Kay's changed over the
Yeah.
years. And my daughter's like, who's Mary Kay? Because she's 17. But it's been such a beautiful time talking with you, Shannon. I just think we could have 12 more sessions. There's so much going on. I think we could do a whole session on the flippers. We had a couple real estate guys who are wholesalers doing flips and we had a guy from Alaska. He had
Oh
120
wow.
properties, sold 60 of them. So we have a
Mhm.
lot of real estate people. So we were excited to have you as a rideshare representative
Mhm.
and then a CDL. I mean, the stories you've probably seen driving trucks all over the country and
You should write a
maybe just
book.
living in Arkansas. Yeah, I was
Yes.
thinking you can have a YouTube channel because your stories must be fascinating. They are. So thank you again for being on the podcast. We really appreciate you.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great.
Awesome. Awesome.